Hello, and welcome back to the Pretty Passionate Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ruth. Happy to be here. Okay, it's getting cooler out. The holidays are approaching. How are you guys doing? Doing well? I'm busy. And I don't think there's any other word that's ever going to describe my life. I have decided not to wait for the time when I'm not going to be busy, because that's never going to happen. You know what I mean? Like that closet you want to organize, but you're like, when I have time, you're not going to have time. If you're anything like me, you're not going to have time. So carpe diem, seize the closet. I always get anxious on weeks when I know that I'm going to be traveling. Not because I don't love traveling. I absolutely love it. Just, setting up the things, the responsibilities, making sure the kids are going to be okay while I'm gone and all that. It's always a thing. I love it, but it gives me frenetic energy. And those are the weeks I feel like where I get the worst night's sleep. When I need the most rest is when I get the worst sleep. I don't know if it's just me. I mean, and this is before exams, before board exams, everything that I've ever done in my life. When I have a need for more energy, more stamina, your brain's got to be focused and clear, I'm going to have a terrible night's rest. Thank God for melatonin. So this week we are, of course, getting into our continued coverage of Love is Blind, Denver, season 9 on Netflix. This is episodes 10 and 11. And then they have the final episode, episode 12, which is going to be the weddings. And so I'll be covering that as well. I'm hoping to have a special guest join me for that episode. My friend and I, we just literally talk about Love is Blind in our free time. When we're just on the phone talking during our commute or whatever. And we're chit-chatting about the show. And I was like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to join me. You're going to join me on my podcast and we're going to chit-chat about some of the stuff that we have observed and what we found interesting about this season. So I'm looking forward to that. I love to have a guest as much as I enjoy our private chats. I've also got a bonus episode coming up that will be streaming shortly with my husband. Speaking of guests, he joined me to review Marvel Zombies. I told you guys I'd be covering that. We just go through and recap and react and give our highs, our lows, things we love, things maybe we didn't love, and our hopes for the future of Marvel animation. I think I've shared a trillion times that I'm in my 40s and happily. But I feel like the past couple of weeks, I have gotten age-related strays from Gen Z people. 3 to be exact. All right, the first one, it was the middle of a workday, and I ran into a Staples to do drop an Amazon return off. And this young lady was so sweet, so nice. She was staring at me. She was giving me the Gen Z stare, where she kind of just looks, and you don't know what she's thinking. I made some offhand comment, I don't know, maybe small talk about the weather or something like that to just, break the silence. And then she goes, you know what? You're really pretty. You look like Alandria's mom. And in the moment, I thanked her. I said, that was really nice of her. And it made me laugh because I was like, okay, I know who Alandria is. I don't live under a rock. I know that she is a stunning, just Barbie face, just gorgeous Black woman that the internet is currently obsessed with good reason. And I don't know what her mom looks like. Her mom is probably stunning. I mean, stunning would probably beget stunning, right? But y'all, this is like a 30-year-old woman. Hold on, let me see. How old is Alandria? Let me verify this 1 second before I talk out of turn. Yeah, this woman is 27 grown years of age. And again, looks stunning. Not just for her age, just stunning, period. I guess I say that to say, do I really look like the mom of a 27-year-old was what I was thinking in my head in the moment. I was like, okay, I know I'm in my 40s, early 40s. Thank you very much. And I know the math, it works. Technically, I could have had her at 16, 17 or whatever. But I just feel like, what a weird statement to say to someone as a compliment. Or am I being sensitive? Because I don't mind aging. I think that aging is a blessing. It's a sign that you're still here. It's a sign that you've gotten some stuff right because you didn't check out early. I think I want to see my kids get older. I want to see how this whole parenting experiment works out. I want to be a grandma, for sure, because I have an obsession with infants. Can't wait to get some infants in front of me that resemble in any way my babies when they were little. Forget it. I can't wait to be a grandma. But I'm not a grandma. I don't bristle at the word auntie when people of a certain age call me auntie out of respect or whatever. Because I am an auntie. I'm a fabulous auntie, actually. But you can't be in your 30s calling me auntie. That's crazy. I don't have any nephews and nieces your age. I feel like there's a limit. So when this like early 20-something tells me I look like the mom of someone in her late 20s, I did take like a little bit of offense, or I was just confused. It was like, what? And then there was a second incident, again, where someone told me, and not that I look like Olandria's mom, but just like the mom of someone who is at least in their 20s. And I was like, what is going on here? And I asked my husband, I said, do I look like the mother of a 27-year-old woman? Like, for real, like, level with me. Not that we need to, like, necessarily, like, have a meltdown and do anything about it, but I just was like, maybe we're usually a little delusional about ourselves to an extent, right? Our abilities, our looks, our magnetism, whatever our personal positive attributes are. Everyone's got a little bit of delulu going on. But, like, my kids are 3 and 6, I was like, I'm not sure that this works for me. Not one to ever be obsessed with age, but I was like, no. And then the third thing came when I'm not going to, identify these people too, but another Gen Z person was in my orbit talking about Taylor Swift and her recent album release. She said that she was too old for the coquettish America's sweetheart image that she tries to put on. And I was like, too old? Because when I think of Taylor Swift, I think of a young person still. I think she's definitely younger than me. She doesn't look aged, She doesn't look like what I would think is like an inappropriate age for cute. I guess cute has an age limit. But it was a little bit of a surprising thing she said, because I never thought of Taylor Swift as old. And then I thought, well, here's this early 20-something who looks at her as like grown woman status. And it was amusing to me. And I just thought, man, aging can be, if you are sensitive to the idea of losing your youth or somehow leaving a phase of life that you are not ready to leave, I started to understand why some people struggle with aging. Because at a certain point, it's almost like women are assaulted with messages that you are expiring, your relevance is fading, you are becoming matronly, someone's mom, you're entering a phase and a stage that isn't just like, I guess, sparkling and effervescent with youth. I don't feel old, mind you. I don't think I look old. I don't feel old. I don't have an old mindset. And I'm looking forward to all that my future has to offer me. And there are a lot of seeds I planted in my 20s and 30s that I can't wait to harvest, that I know it's going to be a late harvest, that 50s and 60s was when I'm going to reap the maximum of some of those efforts. And that's great. I can't wait. I remember weeks ago seeing something on Housewives of Miami where Adriana got tearful talking about how she doesn't celebrate her birthday anymore because she hates the idea of aging. I felt so bad for her. I understood where she was coming from in the sense that society does put a value on women who are young. And then once women reach a certain age, especially in entertainment, especially in Hollywood, they are relegated to certain roles and, relegated to a certain sense of what sex appeal is. And that has changed, Martha Stewart getting a Sports Illustrated cover. It's changed somewhat, but we still live in a very youth-oriented, youth-driven society. So at the time, but even more so now, like I think I understand why someone who's approaching 60 and doesn't quite feel settled maybe in their life, like Adriana, might be afraid. Because society, people make assumptions, because people say things to you once they perceive a certain level of maturity and age that I don't think they realize might be hurtful or might be taken in a negative way, but that's just the way our society works. I'd love to hear your thoughts, prettyprescription17@gmail.com, about aging gracefully, about aging in general, about what your experience has been becoming a person or a woman of a certain age. And if you ever had an experience similar to mine where you felt like people were actually trying to somewhat age you in advance. My mom looks amazing. I drink my water. I wear my sunscreen. I'm in great health. So aging is not a top of the mind concern for me, but I'd be interested to hear what you... So let's get into our Love is Blind discussion. This is your last chance, obviously, to get out of here, skedaddle, because there will be spoilers. So we're going to go over things by couple. I think that makes the most sense for the discussion that we're going to have. Episode 10, Allie and Anton. They seem to be getting hung up on the drinking stuff with him. His mom comes to meet Allie, and I think this is a really sweet actual first introduction. I didn't think I'd be that affected by her meeting his mom, but his mom she has such an earnestness about her, and she seems like such a loving person, and that she really is welcoming Allie into her heart and her family. And I knew that this would pay off cultural similarities wise, even though he's Russian, she's Brazilian, not the same culture, but just some of those similar cultural themes playing out across different ethnicities. I knew that would be a positive thing for their families. But when Allie sits down with Anton and actually starts to go over in detail the quantity of alcohol he's consuming, I have to admit, I was actually concerned a little bit too. I started adding it up, and she's like, what about this and this beer? And I know some people would probably be triggered by that or feel like it was very controlling of her. But here's what was concerning to me. It is only because he kept acting like he actually could not recall the amount of alcohol he had consumed and where things were. And that's where I was like, really? Do you just not know, or are you just refusing to tell her? I couldn't tell. So that's the part of me that, my spidey senses started to tingle about, like, okay, is this an issue? I gave him a lot of the benefit of the doubt before, because I was like, hey, Russian people can really tie one on, and they can drink a lot more than maybe like the average person, definitely more than me and my weak liver. So lying, or I was going to say fibbing about your alcohol consumption, it's not a diagnosis in and of itself, but it is, for those of you who are healthcare workers, right, is part of that fast evaluation that we can do sometimes when there's a question about alcohol consumption. I think if I were sitting here talking to a patient and he told me that he sometimes lies about how much alcohol he consumes, it would be a red flag for me. If he says, yeah, sometimes I don't tell my wife exactly how much I drink because she gets on my nerves about it. Not great. Not fantastic, but we're gonna let that be, because they seem to have gotten over it. The meeting with his mother, maybe that confirmed some things for her or cleared up some things for her. But that missing bottle of tequila he has no accountability for raised a concern for me. That said, they're still my front runner couple to make it to the altar and say their I do's. KB and Edmund. So I was right. Let me do my I was right dance. As we learned during a tense disagreement in the apartment, they're going back over what happened at the rodeo pod squad reunion meeting. And there was definitely more story regarding how KB kind of finally lost her crap on him after that comment he made about how he wishes she would say more nice things to him. Like Annie had called Nick perfect or something like that. And more on that later. Edmund overheard that and he said, oh man, it's so nice. I wish you would say nice things to me. And then KB lost her patience with him and kind of decided, don't talk to me for the rest of the evening, right? At the time, I thought she was justified because she's asked him many times not to compare her and their relationship to the other people, but it did still seem like her reaction was out of proportion to the insult on hand. I surmised that something must have happened before that this was that last little straw on the camel's back. Turns out he hasn't seemed to absorb any of her feedback, is what it is. She asks him to do certain things. She lets him know what her love language is. She lets him know what she's looking for in a partner and how she would like a partner to complement her life. Before the party, she asked him to go and get some, Western items from some store so they would have the proper themed clothing to wear. He just outright refuses to do that for a reason that doesn't seem valid to her, and she just felt overall in preparing for the evening unprepared or rushed or stressed because she didn't feel like he actually did his part to help her or that he wanted to help her. And he seems to feel like saying, I'm sorry, and then moving on, or saying, I love you, and then moving on, that's going to patch things up. I love you works in certain scenarios if the question is whether or not you love me. But if the question is whether or not you are being actively a partner that is contributing to my life in the way that I want a partner to contribute to my life, I love you is not going to cut it. And you can tell she's growing weary of the situation, but it's like that social worker personality is not letting her give up on him. She is so clearly someone who is prone to falling into fixing people. She even said something about knowing his potential and having made the mistake in the past of falling in love with someone's potential, and how she really just doesn't want to do that here. So I was relieved to hear that she's aware of her tendency to do that, but you can still see she's giving him so much grace because of that carer personality of hers. I have a lot of nurse friends I know who have this problem too. I don't know, men who need fixing something. They know about this personality type as well, I'm convinced. And they seek you out because they know how this is going to go. They're broken. You're a fixer. You're a carer. You're a nurturer. And so they're going to come to you with their broken pieces, and you're going to have all the empathy that God put in your hearts to be able to do the careers that you do. It's hard to separate that. Women like this, so need to bubble wrap their emotions and bubble wrap their personality because they're such a gift in their career field. But this becomes a weapon that sometimes I feel like guys use against them, intentionally or not. I'm still rooting for her to ditch him and go back and find that British guy who was in the pods. I mentioned that to my friends. She was like, who was he? I was like, the camera panned to him a few times for reactions in the men's quarters, but we never got to know much about him at all, except that he had a British accent and he seemed reasonably attractive. So I was like, go find him. If he lives in Denver, that's great. Or, as I mentioned last week, link up with Patrick. Great catch, guys. What are you ladies doing in Denver? You're just letting a great catch like that just run around single, unmarried, no children. What? So that's KB and Edmund. They did have that cute rollerblading moment. That was nice. And I will say I was surprised with KB's reaction to Edmund when they went snowmobiling. So it's definitely clear that she has patience for him up to a point. And then her buttons can be pushed by him, and it's clear that his buttons can be pushed by her. So I'm still rooting for them to break up because I just think there is a fundamental incompatibility issue. I think there's a fundamental immaturity issue with Edmund. Although he seems like a great guy who's made great strides in his life, I definitely think he's got a ways to go before he's ready to be someone's husband and someone's dad, but that's just my opinion. Okay, on to Annie and Nick, the train wreck that we all saw coming. Another I told you so, y'all. Am I psychic? I don't know. Maybe I'm wasting my gifts with this whole plastic surgery thing and I need to just tap into my Miss Cleo because I told you this guy was a freaking faker and a robot and something was wrong with him and that he was not right. And even though he was working so hard to be this romantic, sweet, I think we're great together kind of guy. He was working really overtime to make himself look so perfect and eligible. And then the way he broke up with her, she's do you hate her? Or do you just no longer want to be in a relationship headed to marriage with her? It really is hard to tell. Just no heart. Let me hit pause. I will give him this. She is annoying. I could never date her. I don't have a personality type that can deal with someone who needs constant reassurance. So I do think that is in part an underlying issue, and he's mentioned it. But I will say for Annie, in her defense, part of the reason she constantly seeks reassurance from him is that, yes, needy personality type, but also maybe she's sensing something. She's sensing his reticence. She's sensing that he's not all in. I think back in Mexico, the thing that has been plaguing them since then is the fact that she said, I could marry you tomorrow. And he was like, brown? Well, I'm going to see. We still have some time. I think that is just in her head, paired with her somewhat needier personality. She puts on a lot of bravado, right? She has this fake confidence of, I don't need you. I just want you. She says that mantra over and over to herself, when she said it in Mexico after that argument they had. But I feel like she's ineffectively hiding behind that when, especially after the rodeo, the argument that we find them in the throes of, it would drive Jesus to drink. She's trying to have a serious conversation with him and she's clearly inebriated and she's asking about how he's not all in. It's coming up again. When someone is 3 sheets to the wind, it is intolerable when they're trying to have a logical conversation with you. Her being 100% and him blatantly telling her he's mostly sure, but not 100% sure. She's been off the rails about that ever since. And all she says, but I love you, but I love you, I love you, I love you, repeatedly. And then she, it seems since they've gotten back to Denver, has made every serious discussion they've had about how much more she loves him than he loves her. Now, that's what I'm saying is in the background. Far be it from me to cape for Nick and his robotic fake self, okay? Absolutely not. But I just know even if he did have the best of intentions and was actually a genuine and nice guy, this would test anyone's patience. This kind of thing, I think. You don't love me. Do you love me? I feel like that would get old. So far be it from me to defend Nick, because I think he's still definitely off. But I would have broken up with her for this reason as well. I feel like even a nice person, a nice guy, would have broken up with her for this reason, because it's a big burden to take on someone who signed up for an experiment where we're going to decide over time if we should get married, but like we're not even halfway through that time, or before we even get to the halfway point of our allotted time, you need me to tell you I'm 100% sure. I think even with a good guy who intended to get married, which is not Nick, by the way, that would be asking a lot. That's just my thought. But that argument sets the table, okay, for them. They're sitting on the couch the next day chatting about brunch. So that argument took place the evening of the rodeo, or I guess maybe early morning, who knows how late it was. And then so they go out to brunch the next day. They're sitting on the couch reflecting about that. And she's like, oh, I sure needed that. Basically, I was hungover, hair of the dog, yada, yada. And it seems like they're having a nice chat and they're going to resolve some things. Now that everybody's sober and hydrated, they're going to have a conversation. Instead, somehow he quickly arrives at, I can't do this. And then remains there, resolute, as in like, this is not a discussion. This is him giving her information that he will not be marrying her, and he doesn't even want to continue to date her at this point. Yikes on bikes. I was like, where did this come from? You take me to brunch and then you dump me like that after brunch? I don't know. It felt so rehearsed, you know? It's like, it felt so planned, and so like this was something he intended to do from the beginning, probably no matter who he had linked up with. And I know I said what I said about Annie being a pest, but I feel like Nick would have done this even if she hadn't, you know? Like almost, he was looking for her to give him a good enough reason. And then once she did with her pestiness, he was like, great, I'm out. Because he has no emotion during the breakup. And I know some people are not externally emotional people, right? They just wrestle with their emotions internally and you see very little on the surface. But I mean, it's that he even gets annoyed with her for being emotional about the breakup. I found that part weird. Then when he suggests, okay, that we pack up our stuff and leave, I noticed his bags are already packed. I was like, what? I need footage. I need footage of what happened in the apartment after brunch before this discussion. Like, was he in his room just quietly packing? Because, like, she's still throwing stuff in the bag and coming out to talk to him and distraught and crying and looking like her lashes are about to fall off. And his bags are neatly, psychotically packed and stacked on top of each other, ready to wheel them out. Like he's headed for an airport, like appointment style, you know? I saw that and I was like, nah, that's a cold dude. That's a cold dude. I know she's embarrassed and hurt, but lady Annie, you should not be begging for any man that can stand there and watch you sob and feel nothing. You don't want that kind of man in your life. A woman is going to go through so many emotions in her life that she needs a man to be affected by her emotions. Like, not manipulated, but affected. If your man can watch you sob and cry and fall apart like Annie was doing in front of Nick and feel nothing, that's not the one for you, honey. It's not the one for you. Somehow you annoy him. Your tears get on his damn nerves, okay? And in Nick's case, I'm just saying, check his freezer for dead kittens. Something's off about that guy. And that's all I'm going to say about him. I'm glad they didn't waste our time getting all the way to the altar, because that would have been upsetting. Seeing him talk to his robotic family in that groom suite, who's like trying to pretend to care, would have probably been a bridge too far. I mean, so thank goodness he spared us that torture. Joe and Madison. Okay, another dumpster fire. Joe gets to meet her family. Oh my God, why was this meeting so uncomfortable? Was it her sister? Because her sister's a little bit on the extra side. She's very exuberant and seemingly nice, but like very, very outwardly expressive for meeting someone for the first time. So I don't know. Or was it that we know that he just doesn't want to be with her in the end? So meeting her family is like, okay, sir, you're keeping this going. When are you going to level with her and yourself? Right? And then her mom, for me, reminding us about the eye condition, about the retinitis pigmentosa that she has, and her reason for entering the experiment, that she wants someone who is not stuck on the physical, on beauty, on all of that, and who really cares about her because she might go blind and they need to support her through that. I don't know, I got a little choked up about being reminded of that truth and knowing that Joe straight up told us, she's not my type. And then the way he's behaving is telling us even more all along that she's not the one for him. He's not in love with her in the way that one should be with a woman they're going to marry. So he's kind of been playing this like seemingly one foot out the door and almost like, I'm going to be a jerk and maybe she'll break up with me. Once it becomes apparent that actually, no, Megan's not going to break up with you because she's genuinely in love with you and she's going to give him all the rope. It's like he gets annoyed with her. And then they always have this like tension, I think, because of this dynamic. Like, he's unwilling to be truthful about his feelings. for her or lack thereof. And he's also annoyed with her that she's not picking up on his lack of goodness towards her and moving on herself and kind of letting him off the hook from having to do the dirty work of the breakup. So we end up going to the dreaded tux and bridal shop scenes, and I have to be honest, I hate these so much. I can't decide which annoys me more, like going through the groom and bride suite at the wedding for people who end up saying no and knowing completely they were going to say no at the end of that aisle. That annoys me. But these scenes are so stupid. Here's why. I'm grateful, okay, that like Nick and Annie weren't there to waste our time, because that we knew that was not going to last. But then we have to go through the 2-dress process for every single woman, and it's just annoying. Like, so I did some wedding dress shopping in my day. It's not always just going to take 2 dresses. Every single person is like 2 dresses, and maybe they went there and did some pre-selecting and they narrowed it down to 2 dresses. Honestly, I'd like to know that rather than them setting it up like they just miraculously always narrow it down to 2 dresses in one session like this. No, not the 2 dresses. Just do the 1 dress if you want to do a try on. Just come out in the 1 dress, let everyone ooh, ah, and cry and move on. The 2 is annoying. And I can't tell you how annoying. I fast forward through some of these scenes, I'm not going to lie. But they pop back and forth between the bridal shop and the tux shop. Thankfully, they do skip those family, like on the fly interviews where they talk to the individual family members or friends at the bridal shop. They do a little bit of at the tux shop, but not too much. But really the most interesting thing that happens in this set of scenes is that 1, Anton is reassured by his mom and his like best friend that Allie is worth the risk, that she is the one, and so he should be all in and not be worried about protecting his heart. I say, duh, we can all see her, bro. We are not blind. The 2 of them together is, I don't know, I see it as perfect, I think. And then the other thing that happens is that Joe has a complete meltdown. Dude is like butter in a microwave. Okay, his friends are trying to just joke with him. You know, the guys do a little bit when they get together. He has this selected jacket he's putting on, and he's like, okay, should I put a tie? Like, yes, you should put a tie. It's a wedding. So he's trying to put a tie on, and he can't seem to tie the tie. I don't know if he lacks the skill and the skill set to do it, or if he's just really nervous and kind of breaking down in that moment. The shop employee repeatedly offers to help him. She's like, I can help you. I can do it. He's like, no, I got it. But then he repeatedly fails to tie the tie properly. And at some point he just balls it up. He's like, it's fine. I don't need to put it on. I'll take this one. Then the producers, they sit him down. They're interviewing him on a couch, just touching base with him, probably doing that with all the guys, right? Like after how did it feel? Do you feel ready? That kind of thing. Somewhere in the rather light softball questions they're launching at him, he says, can we just do this tomorrow? Like, I can't do this. And then he gets up, storms out of the tuxedo shop. He doesn't even address his friends, who they like get up and to look at the window. They're confused. Like, where did Joe go? When I saw this part of the scene in the preview, I had been worried that this was happening on the wedding day, like at the altar. And I'm actually relieved that it happens at this stage. So this takes us to the end of the episode and leaves us on a bit of a cliffhanger. One of the couples we didn't spend much time with at all in episode 10 is Megan and Jordan, and we're going to have a much bigger focus on them when we pick up in episode 11. On to episode 11. It opens with Joe and Madison actually having their breakup. It's kind of a heartbreaking scene because, of course, the last episode we got a reminder from Mom about the importance of this whole experiment to Madison, why she's even in here and what she was hoping to get out of the experiment and walk away with in terms of a partner who will be with her through her possible vision loss journey. And that's understandable. You know, that's a good reason for her trying to find a husband in this way. And it sucks that the person she poured this much into is just not into it. You can see he's not as cold as I would say Nick was, but he's resolute and detached for sure. You know, he's entertaining her. I get the impression that Joe is very concerned about his image. Not enough to drive him to do certain things, like to just do like the right thing from the beginning in Mexico, or maybe, you know, something that would not have led to this level of letdown for her. And maybe no matter what he did, she would have been tremendously let down. But I do think a lot of what he did, walk with me. I don't want people to be faking, right? If you just don't think it's going to happen for you. But I do think a lot of what he did confused her. And a lot of what he did and how long he dragged this out was not for the sake of, let me see if I can really make this work, if I can really fall in love with this girl. It just never felt quite like that so much as, let me figure a way out of this situation. But where I fault him is the level of physical intimacy he seemed to enjoy with her that she referenced all the time. Maybe she's exaggerating, but I just think if you know that it's really just not turning around for you, I think you need to dial it back on that. And for a lot of people who might be otherwise a little bit dense about someone's not that into them, you start dialing back the physical intimacy and saying no thanks and passing on some of that, the cuddles and the sex, maybe she'll start to pick up on that and actually figure out that there's a major issue. Instead, I feel like they probably had sex the night before. Who knows, because she is so floored and shocked. Even though I guess it was obvious to us, I have to imagine that getting those mixed signals from him, being kind of cagey and not necessarily ready, but also like all over her physically from what she describes, like maybe maybe that wasn't the best decision on Joe's part. I know boys will be boys, and a lot of people will excuse this behavior and say, well, that's just how men are. And I know that's something that men can do. They can detach from that emotional, that genuine, deep connection and attraction and just make it all about the physical gratification of intimacy. But it's just weird to me that it took him that long to work up the whatever it was, like anger, disgust. I don't know what he had to feel finally besides just sheer panic at the tuck shop to be able to break up with her, but he finally got there. Again, the end of the relationship is not a shocker, but I'm upset that in the moment of the breakup, okay, this is your moment, Joe. Like, it's happening. You stormed out of the tuck shop. You made a scene. I mean, image is not something we need to be concerned with right now. Damage control on this is just crazy. I mean, I think, is there a possibility that he's still holding back because he doesn't want to hurt her feelings? I want to say that's possible, but we all know this is a show they're filming. And he said what he said, and she's going to see that. She's going to see that footage. There's no way, obviously, there's no reason for him to think they're not going to include the footage where he talked about being unattracted to her because of her weight. And so I just didn't love that in the moment of the breakup, he couldn't honor her and just be forthcoming. And not like, hey, you're a little too chubby for my taste, so that's why I'm out of here. But I think something more along the lines that will not leave her in a position for when she actually watches the show airing. And this is going to be a shock to her. She's going to see that confessional shortly after the reveal. I guess it was in Mexico. He said it plain as day that he's just not into her physical body type. Didn't she deserve to hear that on the couch? Didn't she deserve for him to look her in the eye and say, I thought I could do this experiment. I thought I had the maturity level or the openness to go through with this, but it turns out I didn't. And maybe that's something I need to work on, or it's just something I need to face, be honest with, and move accordingly. But either way, it's not for us, because she kept asking him why. That's why I'm harping on this. I would say most people would struggle with someone who is seemingly about to marry them, regularly having sex with them, just out of the blue breaking up with them. I think most people would struggle with that. He just keeps saying, it's not right. It's just not right. It's just not right. I just know it's not right. And so I can't do it. And I don't think that's not a fair answer to her. She gives him many opportunities to tell her. And she even asks him, like, did you meet someone else, right? From the pod squad, which is a reasonable assumption because from her standpoint, everything was pretty okay. And then they go to this rodeo pod squad reunion. And the next day is Tux's or whatever. And he's breaking up with her. So I could see how she connected those dots. At first I was like, what? But yeah, I could see how she connected those dots. And he's like, no. He begs off of that. And still refuses to clarify and say why. And maybe you're thinking, she should be able to tell that he's not into her. But I ask, how? He's sleeping with her, he's affectionate with her, there's cuddles and all this. She basically has no reason to believe that. He didn't indicate that at all. If he was sleeping on one side of the bed and not trying to be all physically intimate with her, I would say, girl, can't you tell the man hasn't touched you, right? But I feel like this is a bit of a mental game that some idiots play. Like these men who decide in advance what their ideal woman looks like, what package she comes in, regardless of what kind of person she is and what about the personality that he clearly liked about Madison in the pods, that becomes unimportant because she does not fit in this box of what his ideal woman archetype is. And I think a lot of guys are guilty of this. I think a lot of women are guilty of this. I'm not just trying to skewer guys on this. I have girlfriends who, for one reason or another, are stuck on height, for example. And they meet a short king. He's got his life together, great job, great personality, great teeth. That matters. Everything is like, package-wise, pretty on point, And they will hit a wall on attraction because he's not significantly taller than them. Some were like 5'7" and stuff. And these girls are like 5'1", 5'2". He's 5'6", 5'7". Okay, yeah, he's not towering over you, but this is not someone who's like actually diminutive and physically smaller than you. But they have that archetype in their brain of what does my ideal person look like. And so that same woman will probably go on this show and oh, wait, we saw that. That was like Casey. She has something in her brain of what her husband looks like. And no matter how connected she might have felt before she could see Patrick, the physical ruined it for her. And same, I think, applies to Joe. I mean, we've all had this experience. I've had this experience dating a guy who was, he was a real life modelizer, if you're familiar with the term from Sex and the City. And it was crazy because when I saw that episode, I was like, that was him. So a total gentleman, enjoyed each other's company, so much in common, all the things. I thought he was great. And he would tell me I was gorgeous and you're beautiful. And someday some man will be lucky to have you kind of talk. So I knew there was an end point here. Some man someday will be so lucky to have someone as great as you. You're the total package. So complimentary. But we weren't going to have a future because I was not a model. Like a working model. Like he needed his woman to be a working model. And on the island of Manhattan at the time, there was no shortage of those. So it begs the question, why are you here wasting my time if what you're after is a 5'11" Amazon, the whole thing? Terrible, right? But I know from personal experience, and I hear it all the time with my single friends dating, and obviously we see it all the time in examples like this. So I don't know how you prevent that except someone has a moment of deep introspection and knows who they are and then actually acts on that and controls themselves, decides not to waste other people's time and just go for what you want. We're in the middle of New York City. There's models everywhere. You throw a rock, you hit a model. Go for one of those. Leave me alone. Like Madison, I didn't understand his mindset at very first. So I was making the mistake of like, okay, but he's taking me out on fancy dates. We're meeting friends, hanging out. He's telling me all this nice stuff, but that was his stated objective, to date and possibly marry a model. You're a doctor, you might be attractive, but you're not a model. He's probably biding time with someone compatible until a model came along. Who knows? I did not stick around long enough to ultimately find out. What we do know about Madison is that she's gutted, and the poor girl did not deserve this at all. I know I pointed out some of Annie's more annoying personality quirks, the neediness that would test the patience of Job. With Madison, I can't really easily point to something that she did wrong. Yes, okay, there was that weird, crazy argument in Mexico, but I still feel that the basis behind most of their arguments was the lack of transparency and truth between them. And then that led to other little things boiling over and her constantly trying to search for the missing thing, the thing that was going to make it come together for him and make him feel 100%. And that never happened. A side note, dear Madison, beloved, did she touch up her fillers, her lip fillers? Because they were looking so full and like almost like swollen and a little bit like 1 or 2 days out from a fresh filler touch up. They weren't looking like a first-time filler. They were looking more like a touch-up during this breakup, and I can't lie, that was a little distracting. But obviously, that's me and what I do for a living, so it was just drawing my eye. I felt terrible for her, but I know that she's a beautiful, gorgeous girl. She's very sweet. I think it's only up from here. She's probably going to come back to the reunion. Like, she's one of those girls, I think, who will come back to the reunion with some kind of like crazy nice haircut, the makeup is fierce, the skincare is back in order, and, just looks great in her dress and everything, and probably like has a man, she's found somebody else, and she's moved on. I hope to see that at the reunion. I don't want to see her cry tears over Joe Ferrucci, isn't that his name? Whatever, over Joe anymore. We're done with him. Sweet girl. Poor thing. Edmund and KB. Okay, first of all, a couple of things. Him being on the back of that snowmobile, woohooing while she's driving, was taking me out. The screams and the woohooing while your girl is driving the snowmobile, he's an interesting guy. I mean, he's so quirky, you can't help but really like him. I also it caught my attention because I know that traditional gender roles is something that not everyone is into, but I feel like KB has given him lots of signals that she is interested in him picking up a traditional masculine role in her life. And like she wants him to lean into that when it comes to caring for her. So, like when it came to like defending her, if some dude was grabbing all over her and killing bugs and all that. And so I'm like, here we are, like you're making her drive the snowmobile for, whatever reason. Maybe he's just not comfortable operating a snowmobile, and that's fair. But I just thought, I wonder if this is ticking another box in the, negative pile for her or pissing her off, because what happens at the top of the mountain is a big fight. But before we get into that, sometimes like with Edmund, he's a complex person. And sometimes I feel like I want to see a 3-episode, like little mini series on his actual life. What actually happened from his perspective, maybe interviewing neighbors, siblings, cousins, what was his life like? And then what led him from West Virginia to Denver? That's quite a leap. Statistically, a lot of people who grow up in poverty, especially in the United States, they don't necessarily migrate that far from where they're from. Why? Because it's expensive. It costs money. It's hard to do that. It's even if you're talking about a Greyhound bus ticket, okay, where are you going to land? If you don't have any family, you don't know anyone in a new city, etc. So, I feel like Edmund's got a very interesting backstory that is worth telling. So I hope in his post Netflix life, he actually digs into that a little bit. Maybe publishes a book or something, does a podcast, or I don't know, but something where we all get to know a little bit more about his backstory, but I digress. So they get to the top of the mountain on their date, and I noticed that KB is being a little bit cold, and that's what raised the question of is she pissed that she drove this snowmobile and he didn't? She's like, I'm gonna go get some hot chocolate. She goes into this little cabin looking thing and gets some hot chocolate, and somehow they still manage to have those gold mugs, even at the top of a mountain. Why are the gold drinking vessels following these people everywhere? I'm not understanding. And maybe it's something I missed in season 1 as a point, because why? I can understand if you didn't want people to know that they were consuming alcohol, right? So you're not going to do the clear glasses or whatever, but it's clear that they're drinking when they're drinking. It's clear that that's their wine glasses and other beverages, but those freaking cups follow them everywhere, and it's to the point of incredulity. Were the gold cups at the restaurant with Allie and Anton, or is that my imagination? I'm going to have to go back and look at it again. Someone, if you actually know the answer to this, please provide clarity. Drop a comment. Send me an email, prettyprescription17@gmail.com. I would love clarity on this. Anyway, she sits down next to him, says a snide remark about how he doesn't help her get down to where he's sitting. And they're basically sitting on a pile of snow that has this breathtaking view of snow-capped mountains, evergreens, and it's just gorgeous. And I'm just I can't believe they get to look at this all the time. Every time I see mountains, I feel my heart rate go down. But despite all that calming scenery, honey, she's not happy. She starts to read him the riot act about how they had another fight, I guess, on their way here, but that his behavior, it flip-flops when he's on and off camera. So when he's off camera, he was upset about something with his bachelor party. They're doing a country western, I guess, theme of some kind, and he was upset about that. But when they picked up the cameras and when they showed up, I guess when the film crew showed up, he turned it right on to yay snowmobiling, right? And I guess I wasn't expecting that. I was, I guess, under the impression this whole time that even though it can be a little off-putting, even though his personality can be a lot, that Edmund is consistently being his authentic self. And that's one of the reasons why I try so hard to give him grace and forgive him, because I'm but what you see is what you get, at least with him. So threw me off a little bit that, we're getting two sides to Edmund here. Obviously, that's her opinion. We don't necessarily see that happening. One thing I did not love, she called him a bitch and she cussed him all the way out. I mean, it was 0 to 100 and it just wasn't great to watch. I do totally empathize with losing your mind, because sometimes in an argument, if you feel like you're being gaslit or even maybe purposely not understood, the person is just not trying to understand you, I can see how it can trigger. And so unkind things might be said, not that it's right, but I get it. I totally get it. But I was calling him a bitch? I was Edmonds is a different kind of guy. I mean, I know a lot of dudes who that would set them off. So kind of after that tirade, just got up and walked away. And usually I'm siding with KB in their arguments, but I just didn't love the way she handled this one. But that said, then they get back to the apartment and the conversation they have there is sweet. I will say. Again, I like Edmund as a person. I just don't think he's ready for marriage, especially not to someone who's as ready as KB is. But that said, I do appreciate her taking ownership over some of her stuff and what she did wrong. Like, she owned the blow up and she didn't just justify it by saying, well, you made me kind of thing, which is important. It wasn't right. Full stop. That's the end of the sentence. And talk about how you're going to try to do better in the future. You know, it may take some time, but he didn't deserve all of that. So they're back on track and seemingly still headed for the altar, much to my chagrin. And then they do share a really cute scene where he gets to take her out with the rollerblades. It did two things for me. One, it let me see Edmund in a bit of his element, in an environment, in a situation where he feels very comfortable, and he was showing off in a cute way, like a good way. He was just showing off like his skill, his comfort level, how good he is with skating, that it's kind of his happy place. I liked KB getting to see that, but I also enjoyed the audience getting to see that. The other thing is that it gave me some insight as far as interactions between them about, okay, since the pods, what are some moments where she's really enjoying him? Like, just enjoying the heck out of him, and they're laughing and enjoying each other. Because I feel like we haven't gotten to see a whole bunch of that. We've seen her tolerating him, maybe correcting him, but straight up enjoying him, no. So this was cute. And she's also really good on rollerblades. I thought this was her first time on rollerblades, and I know that there's some, if you can skate, you can learn to rollerblade. But listen, I felt so badly in college. It took me falling one time on some rollerblades, and I'm really good on roller skates, but I fell one time on rollerblades in college and skinned the life out of my elbow, and I was like, I'm good. So they got real dusty. But anyway, still don't think they should be together. Just in case you're getting confused by the fact that I admitted they had a cute moment, doesn't mean that I think they should be together. He has some work to do. Maybe her too, now that we've seen this blow up. So, okay. Allie and Anton, moving on to who I think is the most promising couple. They seem to have moved on from the conflict they were having in the last episode about the drinking and all that. And I did wonder if it has to do with, I mentioned how his mom came and she may have smoothed some things over. I don't know, reassured her that he's not a degenerate. So they're both excited. They seem ready to say yes. I liked their little outing they had with the horse-drawn carriage. He said something about having a real estate business that is growing, and somehow that gives me hope that maybe, okay, they're not that far apart financially in terms of goals. So that's a good thing. One thing I found interesting is that they did this thing that a lot of couples on Love is Blind do, but I don't think it's actually like a positive thing. And it gives me a little bit of cringe factor when couples are like, oh my gosh, we're like so much alike. We finish each other's sentences. We're so compatible because we're exactly alike. And I'm like, no, that's not usually how that works. People who are very similar to each other will initially have like a little honeymoon of love. Oh my gosh, it's so great. And then eventually you get on your own nerves, you know? Think about your own like internal monologue that you have with yourself and how kind you are to yourself. And then think about that being personified and how eventually that person's habits and stuff would get on your nerves because they're so much like your own. Also, side note, like, was anyone else getting cold just watching them hang out in the snow and ice like that? Like, I was like, man, he is very Russian, but I was even surprised by her. I guess you just get used to the frigid cold because he didn't even have a coat. And I would be like, teeth chattering, you know, I'm living in Georgia. I'm not acclimating to cold weather. I love it. I love snow. I love bundling up. There's something very comforting about it, I guess, because I grew up in the Northeast, so lots of snow in winters, and so there's something comforting, familiar, and fun about doing it for a time, and then I need a break. I think Allie and Anton are on track. They're going to be fine. They're going to say yes at the altar. If they do not say yes at the altar, it will be a great shock to me at this point. And thankfully, we only have one more episode to go to find out, right? All right, Megan and Jordan. Let's get into them, because lots to say about their interaction here. We catch up with them at Kimosabi, which I love Kimosabi. I'm definitely treating myself to a hat. Last time I went in Jackson Hole, I chickened out of the hat thing because I was just like, I had other things on my mind that I wanted to buy. But I love that place. So much fun. The sales people were so welcoming and wonderful, at least at the one in Jackson Hole. I highly recommend. And next time we go, I'm getting a custom hat made and I'll share it with you. Maybe I'll wear it for an episode because I don't know, because I need a cowboy hat. So they have a conversation about stuff they don't like about each other, which is kind of a weird way of putting it, but I guess, you know, you're about to marry this person. So like out with it already. What is some crap that bothers you about me and vice versa? Fair and honest conversation. She shares that she's very bothered by the fact that he doesn't really chat with her. As in, I guess when they're back at the apartment, end of the day, end of a work day, she'd love to catch up with him and hear how his day went. And he states like unequivocally that he does not want to do that. And he enjoys their awkward silences. He enjoys the silence. And basically he comes home for peace. I thought for a second, I was like, that's interesting because you have a 5-year-old, but I guess he's not with him full time. But I don't know how you get peace and quiet around a 5-year-old. If you figure it out, literally please send me an email, because even when they're engaged in activities they love, let me tell you, if my husband and I, or both of us are in the room, we are going to hear constant chatter, especially from the 3-year-old, the little one. He just is the most talkative person I ever met. Anyway, I guess maybe that's why Jordan is so bent on having silence. I don't know. Later on, he says, if you did what I did for a living, like, you'd be all talked out too, which, okay, fine. Again, this is not necessarily like a bad thing if they both, from where they are, agree to meet each other in the middle here. Because Meg is obviously a talkative person, or she likes to talk about certain things. This reminds me of her interactions with Mike and why they were so compatible, is that I think she likes to talk a lot, wax poetic about their plans for world domination. You know, they're just gonna like, yeah, this is what happened at work today, and this guy tried to do this, and I put him in his place. You know, I feel like she would enjoy some kind of debrief with her partner on a daily basis. I do think he's going to have to move that needle a little bit if he wants to have a real relationship with her. Because a talkative person married to an introvert, or someone who is, you know, situationally introverted related to his work, she's going to feel very lonely if he doesn't learn to open up more, is all I'm saying. And you never want to be in a marriage and feel lonely. That's a recipe for disaster. It just brings to mind guys like Mike who can just sit around and talk about their day, their everything, gabbing for hours about how they're going to take over the world, their hopes, their dreams, their goals, you know, how he's like crushing it and he's biohacking and he read this or he saw this on TikTok, or, you know, men of that ilk enjoy having an audience. Obviously, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because, hello, it's different. The guys of that type that I've interacted with, they enjoy holding court, and for you to just sit back and listen, and it's a one-way conversation a lot of the time. And maybe that wouldn't be the case with Mike, but I just get the impression that she's used to a talker. So this is different for her. Back at the apartment, so that's at Kimosabi. Back at the apartment, they have a very tense discussion. Like, so that's where all this stuff comes in, where he's like, foot down, I am not going to change. I want my quiet after work. And somehow I didn't really, you know, Jordan has been this, I don't want to say he's not perfect. No one's perfect, but he's been this refreshing presence on the show. It took a turn for me in this scene only because I didn't like how he handled the tension. Obviously, he's human. He's allowed to express his frustration. It seems like what we caught up with them was like during a moment of financial stress, because he's like, you know, he's looking at his phone or something and he's clearly distracted, and he makes a flip comment about it more than once. But even when they take the argument or discussion into the next room, he's trying to explain to her, your boat is bigger than mine, basically saying, no, like, you have more than me. I don't have as much as you, and so sometimes I get stressed out about work, about finances, about things of that nature. I didn't love it. I didn't love it because that was one of the reasons she wanted to come on the show, was to find someone who wasn't focused on like being a perfect match financially and all that, and not trying to live off of her. And so I saw that she like wanted, it looked like she was about to cry. And he's definitely feeling the pressure that men tend to feel from high earning women that revel in their wealth, right? She's like, I'm going here, I'm going there, I'm traveling at the drop of a hat. I am enjoying my life. I'm living a big, full life. And he is over here raising a child, maybe not even just as a result of having the child, but having a child that pulls a lot of his resources. So he's not as footloose and fancy free with his money as he would be if he wasn't a father. And he probably also just at a baseline doesn't earn as much as she does. I think even when they don't intend for this to be the case, men generally struggle with this. Speaking from personal experience, my experience with this was repeatedly dating guys who were intimidated even by my income potential, like in the future. The fact that we were on equal footing, or hey, they were on top as I was getting closer and closer to the end of my training and closer to fellowship and all those things. I think for a lot of guys, it sets in that one day she's going to have more, and therefore, I don't know, maybe more of an opinion, maybe more power in that power dynamic, something was off there that they found uncomfortable. And I feel like the men come in different varieties. I'm not painting y'all as a monolith, but I definitely know that there's a lot of guys who would struggle in that scenario and struggle the way Jordan is struggling. And he says that he has a very super demanding job. He kind of says very harshly to her, like, this is not the pods. And he seems like he's at the end of his rope. And it makes me wonder what is going on. Maybe is it like a medical bill for Luca? It's triggering empathy for me, because he's clearly stressed about something related to the stress of his job, but also financial. It's there. I think, like, is he doing mental math? Because the more he does it, it seems like he arrives at the conclusion that they're not compatible. He's like, you have this big life. You have a jet-setting life. He's reminding her that having a kid means he can't do the stuff that she wants to do and live his life the way that she wants to. She wants a partner who can be able to drop everything and go with her on these random adventures, but he has a kid. And so even if the money wasn't an issue, which I suspect it might become an issue, he still can't just drop Luca and go do all the things she wants to do when she wants to do them. And he's making very solid points that, you know, she chose him because he's different from the guy she's used to being with. And I guess he's not giving up on the relationship just because they've identified this major hiccup. But I'm sitting there watching the conversation and totally expecting a breakup. You know, I'm expecting one of them to say, like, well, then this just won't work. It's sad because I think they have potential, but I also see Megan is set on this particular vision for her future, which she is perfectly entitled to. She works hard. She earns well. She should not feel bad about enjoying her accomplishments that have led to the wealth that she enjoys. But as a woman who, you know, that high earning potential thing, it can be an obstacle, sadly. I empathize with her, even though I didn't like the whole Sparkle Megan thing. I empathized with her coming on saying that it seems ridiculous, but her income is a challenge as a single person. I would not want at this stage in my career to be single, because I know it would be an issue, and that it has been an issue, and that even the potential of me being at this point was an issue. So fingers crossed they come to some kind of agreement. But a man's ego is a fragile thing as well. She said her love language is gifts. Is she willing to shift that love language in any way to make him more comfortable? Like she doesn't know how to show her love other than showering people with expensive gifts. And I get it, because I love giving people fun, nice, fancy things, something they really wanted, you know, something I know that they've been really like having their eye on. I love doing that. However, if that person is receiving it in a negative way, then you've got to shift it. And he was telling her, you know, you don't have to spend $100 on a Lego set for Luca. He just wants to spend time with you. Go sit in a park and you can play with him, spend time with him. His focus is more on the relational aspect. And I think he's not understanding that the way she builds the relational aspect is through gift giving. Obviously, that's why the 5 love languages exist, because everyone doesn't see eye to eye on them. I think they may make it to the altar and someone's going to say no. And if I'm looking at this conversation, I think if Megan's going to have a good little think, you know, at home, when it's quiet and she's in her thoughts, because she's definitely a type A overthinker, I just don't see how she could disregard this conversation and still be like, nope, it's Jordan for me all the way. This is perfect. I feel like if she's being logical, she's going to call off the wedding and go find Mike. I'm sorry. And I'm not a Mike fan. You guys know I'm not a Mike fan. But as compatibility goes and the life that she wants and all that she's laying out, you know, he showed up to the experiment. Maybe he's ready. Maybe he was kind of a jerk in the past that she would have broken up with in the past. But maybe where he is right now at this point in his life, maybe he is ready, and finding Megan would have really worked for him. But I don't know. Unlike previous seasons, I actually think, you know, they made a lot of fanfare about we're going to get to the altar and then have a breakup scene at the altar. And in some cases, a contentious breakup scene at the altar, which was always horrible. The people who are headed to the altar now, I think they have genuine doubt, but have good intention. And so I'm not going to be mad watching these last 3 couples go through the whole process. Right? It's so much more genuine when it's just the 3 couples, because what are the odds that like 6, 7 couples are going to actually make it out and go to the altar and say I do? So I don't want any big confrontations or nasty breakups at the altar. There was just one season where this girl accused this guy of fat shaming her, and she broke up with him in the altar, but in this real sassy kind of nasty way. And I liked her up until that moment, because I felt like if you really believed that he was this terrible person who fat shamed you for eating an orange, Why did you go through the whole process? You should, but who knows? Maybe the direction from the producers and everyone at that time was really to like take it to the altar. But I'm glad that for the problem couples, like we get to not have to see them go through all this and see their families go through all this and get dressed up. It just seems so horrible to do that. So I'm glad that we have these 3 couples that two of them I'm not sure about, but I could see them saying yes as well. All told, I am predicting that Allie and Anton, they're going to go all the way. They're going to be the one couple that gets married and shows up happily married to the reunion. The other 2, it's anyone's guess where they go from here. But I think they're headed for breakups. All right, that is it, okay, for this batch of episodes, 10 and 11. Episode 12 is actually dropping tomorrow. So there's a little bit of a delay for me in terms of these reactions. I'll have episode 12 reactions up and running by early next week for you. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Drop a comment, like, subscribe, and of course share our group chat with a family, friend, or coworker who you think would enjoy. Until next time, bye.